Hey everybody, Ketwolski here, checking out another hashtag Star Trek Picard episode discussion reviews. Today we're going to be, of course, talking about Picard Episode 6, The Impossible Box. Okay, so normally during these review episodes, I like to talk very briefly about all the things that I enjoyed, go into the things that I didn't enjoy, and then talk a little bit about the plot moving forward. However, I'm going to have to try to do something a little bit differently today with you guys in order to try to make this video a little bit more digestible in some ways, because I literally loved every single moment, minute, second of this episode. It is so dense, and it makes sense. This is actually the longest episode of Picard that we've gotten so far in the season, clocking in at around 54 minutes of runtime total, but it kind of has about 50 minutes of actual content, minus the, the stinger at the beginning and the previews at the end. So there is so much going on in this episode with all of the characters, specifically with Picard and Soji and their kind of development and then eventual meetup towards the end of the episode, and it is just a doozy, folks. I loved this episode, 10 out of 10. This is probably rocketing into my favorite episode of the season so far, which is insane considering the high quality of all of the other episodes that we've had so far and how much of a contention it was between episodes 1 and 4, but episode 6 has just blown my expectations way out of the water, and I cannot wait to talk to you guys about it. So the best way for me to kind of go ahead and talk about all the things that I really enjoyed and the plot stuff all at the same time is I'm just going to put up a bit of a slideshow and then move my camera down to the corner and just talk about each of the images and the different things that I really enjoyed about the episode and my theories surrounding about different parts and aspects of what we saw on screen. Hopefully this will make it a little bit more digestible and easier to go through rather than opposed to me sitting here for almost a half hour because I have like 32 different stills to kind of go through. So it would take a long time for me to get through each one of those. So hopefully this will go a little bit faster. Okay, so the episode kind of starts off with this weird nightmarish flashback that Soji is experiencing while she is unconscious / asleep. Now, I really liked this sequence. Obviously, it's setting up that whole puzzle box mentality of Soji having to discover her subconscious and then reconciling with the fact that she is in fact not a human. But I love the way this was set up almost like a horror type situation with the rain in the background and her kind of creeping through the hallway calling out to her dad, who we don't know who is, based off of this kind of, flashback image memory or whatever this is, and then eventually we find out what happens towards the end of this particular sequence. But I liked this stuff, this setup here. It really kind of adds an eerie kind of tension. It really sets the tone for this episode, which is this very unsettling kind of feeling that every character is kind of going through, from, Agnes to Picard to Soji to really just everybody in general feeling a little bit isolated, a little bit alone, even Raffi in a lot of ways as well. So that's very much the tone of this episode. So setting this sequence up here being the kind of pseudo flashback that we're kind of used to for Picard was a really smart idea. I really enjoyed that. I was a little surprised to see Soji and Narek in bed, just considering the fact that in the last episode, we saw her kind of run away from him because he basically accused her of being an imposter. But they play this kind of correctly in my mind. Now, I think I've been pretty vocal about my dislike kind of for this whole relationship subplot and how much I didn't really enjoy it. But I did appreciate the fact that there was an effort to connect the fact that they are still in a relationship, but he's still doing stuff that kind of is suspect to her. And she's definitely questioning him and not letting him really off the hook in so many ways. And in some ways, she's kind of just letting him kind of do his own thing, which is kind of frustrating as us as the viewers, because you're like, woman, don't you know he's dangerous for you? But she's kind of, I guess, unsure of herself, and she's relying on that relationship that she's built with him to kind of guide her through this unsettling time. And I think as much as he's trying to push her to figure it out, she's also interested in finding out who she is, so it makes sense that they would still kind of cling to each other in some way, even if it doesn't really make sense, something that I would do in my own personal relationship, but it makes sense, and I do get it. Something I noticed here right at the beginning, and it's honestly, it's so well done and fantastic job by the props department and all of the managers there that put all this stuff together, is you see these artist mannequins there that are helpful for artists who are drawing things, whether they be hands or body movements or whatever it is. They are obviously kind of setting up a little bit of a, foreshadow of the sequence that we see at the end, where we see, Soji's subconscious seeing her laying on the table, who looks very similar to that mannequin with her face on it, which is super creepy, by the the way, but I like the fact that they kind of teased this already, and it's right next to the picture of supposedly their mom, who we know is just an AI program developed by Maddox, and of course the Daj and Soji, who are the twin sisters who kind of grew up, supposedly grew up as synthetic sisters. They thought they were real sisters, but I like the connection here, and I like that bit of foreshadowing there that these are things that we're trying to visually show us as the audience and tell us, like, hey, you know, things are happening here. Now, we already know this, but the little hand there and the little mannequin there was a really, really great foreshadowing that we later see in the episode. So great job putting those things there. Another really upsetting scene, and again, kind of going along with the tone here, was the discussion between Picard, Agnes, and Elnor. Now, Picard kind of goes on this crazy rant where he's super still frustrated and angry with the Borg and calls them a malignance or something like that, basically implying that they're a tumor and that if they're, you know, left unchecked, that they will continue to grow and destroy and that they don't change. And that's definitely a lot of the sentiment that he kind of portrayed in the First Contact film. Now, obviously, some people may say, well, doesn't he have a good relationship with Hugh in 7 of 9? Well, and wasn't he a former Borg? So obviously Borgs do change. And yeah, some Borgs do, but on the whole, Borgs typically do not, at least in his experience. So the fact that they carried on that kind of anger and essentially his PTSD that they're setting up in this sequence that we experienced in First Contact, I thought was a really smart idea. And the filming angle of this sequence was a really smart choice by the director because it's right up against Picard's face in this kind of top-down creepy angle. And it's unsettling for us as a viewer to kind of experience the sequence in that way, but it's intentional. We're trying to feel that kind of anger and uncomfortableness that Picard's feeling about it. And then obviously also we have Agnes, who's still reeling and emotionally internalizing the fact that she just killed her former lover and mentor and friend Bruce Maddox in the previous episode, which she tries to write off pretty quickly as just, well, it was the internal injuries and it's totally fine, no big deal. And most people, I think, buy it at this point, probably because they're super focused on getting access to the Borg cube in this whole Soji situation. So she's getting away with it for now, but I'm confident that's going to come up later as to what the hell really happened with Bruce Maddox. But the whole theme of this episode, again, is that kind of loneliness, that isolation feeling, and that feeling of just feeling out of place. And Picard and Agnes both are definitely portraying that in the sequence. I love this scene. I also thought it was kind of interesting that just after that whole kind of blow up emotionally about the Borg and how much he hates them still, Picard immediately then runs into his holodeck suite that is also the Chateau Picard den. And I find that interesting because he's once again utilizing this, you know, Chateau holodeck as a place of solace and comfort. It's a place where he's gotten very comfortable with and has definitely found some kind of level of, you know, protection, whether it be not physically, but like an emotional protective blanket that he can wrap around himself. And he clearly went to that location to A, get away from everybody, obviously because these are his quarters, but to B, definitely surround himself in something that is so opposite of what the Borg are, which is one mind, one unity, very mechanical, very anti-person, all that stuff like that, to a place that screams him and his family and his history and his vineyard and his whole legacy as a Picard. So I thought that was a very smart choice to kind of, again, put this den as his ready room / location on the ship. It allows for A, to reusing a set that probably costs a lot of money to build, but B, it definitely enables a lot of really cool narrative bits like this one. I know this seems kind of small, but something I really enjoyed was just this holographic LCARs. I mean, I know that we're on the La Serena and it's not a Federation ship, so it's not like Federation LCARs, but you could still see like the kind of like elements there of the LCARs, that maybe this is an older version that Rios is using for his ship because he was former Federation and he likes the Federation regulations and stuff like that. So I liked it. I thought that was kind of a fun little teaser Easter egg thing. Obviously, one of the most powerful sequences of this episode, and that's saying something because there were a lot in this episode, was this sequence here where Picard comes literally face to face with an image of himself as Locutus of Borg back from the TNG episodes, The Best of Both Worlds. You can even see the kind of top and bottom of the Enterprise D bridge where that, obviously it was a screen grab from the show, but obviously they wanted to reuse that for us as the audience and to make a quick connection between Picard here. This was a great sequence, and I love the fact that he like touched his face because he was still remembering the implants that they put in him. It was so great, and they did such a fantastic job with clearly establishing Picard's PTSD and feelings about being back on the Borg cube. Now, I theorized that we were going to be experiencing some of this in my previous review and my live stream discussion where I talked a little bit about that, but I didn't expect it to the extent that we got in this episode, and I say that in a good way because they actually played that up really well, but we'll get to that. One of the more interesting things that occurred in this episode was this kind of loving, kind of sexual draw energy between Agnes and Rios. Now, Rios is easily right now my favorite new character. He's awesome. Every sequence he's in is just awesome. He's a cool character, and I want to spend more time with Rios. But this whole sequence here was rather interesting. Again, connecting back to that theme of this episode of feeling alone and isolated and empty and hollow and just sadness, really. And Agnus even says all these things, which I think also verbalized a lot of the emotions that Rios was experiencing kind of in his life in general. And they definitely connect. I did not get the feeling that this was part of Agnes's plot to try to, lure Rios into her, good favors to kind of build his trust so that she can later betray him or manipulate him in some way. I think she's genuinely having a reaction to the fact that she had to kill Maddox, is keeping it to herself, and is dealing with an enormous amount of guilt for an enormous amount of different things. And in this situation, she's kind of just acting out in some way. And the both of them, feeling very lonely and isolated, kind of found each other. Now, obviously, the idea of a crew being their family is definitely, they're taking something rather literally here, where maybe they're going to be building a family. I don't know. I don't see them being in a relationship or anything like that, but that would be fun because they're very opposite of each other, and that would be kind of a fun thing to kind of see them going back and forth. But obviously, this is still very preliminary, but I loved this sequence. It was, again, just so dense with information, with him drinking and her sharing a drink with him and then rejecting each other and then coming back together and then going off to have, their sexual relations. I thought the sequence was really well done, and I can't wait to see what the fallout of this whole scenario really is. Okay, so Narek's sister is a very one-dimensional villain. She's obviously Zatvash. She has a very narrow mind. She wants to just take care of business. She's got that very Romulan-esque, stereotypical Romulan attitude. She's very one-dimensional, but I say that as a compliment because everybody else in this show has got all of these layers to them, whereas for her, at least for right now, she's very like, I'm on mission, I've got a thing to do, and I don't care about a damn thing, whether it's my brother, her creepy sexual brother relationship there, or if it's anybody that I know, or if it's anybody on this cube. I don't care what it is. I have a mission, and I'm going to get it done. And she's a little bit of a mustache twirler, but it's fun to watch her on screen because she kind of just enjoys it in some regards. And she's almost like a Palpatine in that way, where they just, like the actor brings this character to life that just enjoys being kind of evil and kind of mischievous and bad. And I think it's kind of fun to watch that, this kind of out of place mustache twirler in this very dense, very layered show. It's kind of fun. It would normally maybe not work, but they found a way by not having her on screen all the time and her not being the primary villain for it to allow it to work effectively. She's not the main villain. There's obviously going to be another villain kind of happening in the background, and there's so many villain type characters and good and bad and gray areas in this where she's not just the main primary focus as the antagonist, so I think that's why it's allowing it to work more effectively, but I love seeing her on screen. I like the fact that they established the puzzle box earlier on, and obviously that is kind of connected to the puzzle box of Soji's mind, and he's trying to slowly, manipulate it so that it will open up, and that way he can finally find out the information that they all so desperately want. And I like how they establish its kind of opening kind of capability, so that later ties into the, in the episode where it actually opens up and releases that nasty toxin. So this was interesting for me. This sequence here where Agnus basically says, hey, why don't we use my credentials to try to get on the Borg cube? And Picard just kind of shoots her down. But she seems really upset about the fact that he shot her down. And it's not because I think that he just rejected her idea. I think she had part of her plan in her mind that she needed to get on that cube to do something specific. And it was this sequence that made me think that I don't think that O is controlling her. I think Commodore O showed her something and that they are now operating in cahoots with each other, and she had a separate plan to do something. I think Commodore O was taking things into her own hands because in her O hands, I guess. She was taking things into her own hands because she did not trust the Zatvash to handle the situation because they screwed up trying to get Dodge so royally. So I think that O was trying to get Agnus to do something very specific so that she could find out where probably the other synthetics are, and then she could go and destroy them herself, kind of in cahoots with O in that way. But that kind of gave me that vibe here. I just love this shot of the Borg cube. I mean, there's really nothing else to say. So this was an interesting sequence here because throughout the entire episode, and this is probably my favorite interaction between Narek and Soji so far in the entire show, where Narek is very slowly and deliberately unveiling different things of Soji's psyche to her. He's already got enough information. He knows what she is. He knows the whole thing. He's got all the cards, but he has to place them down in a very, very careful way as to not get her to activate and to give the information that he needs her to give him. So it was very deliberate on his part. And I like this sequence where he's like, yeah, you talk to your mom all the time, right? Yeah, but every call's 70 seconds. And it's like, she's like, what do you mean? And he kind of goes through this whole thing like, are you sure you know who your mom is and what's going on there? And then she goes off and tries to talk to her mom. And I just like this sequence because it's really showcasing a little bit of that movement forward. Again, this is kind of a stereotypical plot piece where it's, you know, the agent is falling in love with the, you know, the mark, and then he has to eventually betray her, and then, you know, betray her trust and do what he was supposed to do, and then later on he'll probably wind up betraying the organization and his sister to kind of save Soji in some way. We kind of already know how that's going to work, but I did like this sequence. The sequence here with Raffi and Rios was extraordinarily powerful. I definitely felt it. It hit home. Just like the last episode sequence between her and her son Gabriel, where she was trying to come telling me she was clean and she's putting her life around and he kind of rejected her. That is a situation that I'm familiar with. Raffi here kind of reacting in this way and kind of just being very depressed again, connecting to that theme of loneliness and emptiness and hollowness. This whole episode is filled with that, and she definitely plays this really well as an actress, because we really feel that kind of emotional kind of turmoil and sadness that the character is actually feeling. And I thought it was really well done, and I love this scene. Again, this is just a really cool shot of the La Sirena and the Borg cube. So this sequence here between Picard and Elnor. Now, Elnor obviously wants to go on the cube with Picard to protect him, and Picard is, again, kind of being a little bit of a jerk to him by being like, no, you're not coming, and kind of being very stern. But you know, as an audience member and as a Trekkie, why Picard is acting that way. Elnor has no idea what the Borg are or what they are capable of. Picard knows very, very well, and I think the last place he wants someone who he cares very deeply about to go is that Borg cube. No matter how badly he feels isolated and alone and afraid of going there, I think that the idea of anything happening to Elnor, or even potentially even being assimilated, the concept of him being assimilated is so terrifying and just wrong to Picard. He will not allow that to occur, and I love that sequence there. It was definitely well played by both actors. So I mentioned this in a previous review where the walls of the Borg cube kind of saw like little bits kind of moving back and forth in the hallway, and then like different walls kind of being shimmering and stuff like that. But we really see it here played up after Picard beams onto the cube, because all of the walls are kind of like shimmering and like repositioning themselves and resizing themselves. And I love that idea that the Borg cube is constantly kind of rebuilding itself and reshaping itself based off of whatever the Borg's needs are, whatever the individuals who are on there's needs are. I think that's a really cool idea, and it definitely pays off. All of that little mysterious kind of shapes moving back and forth, and even this sequence pays off awesomely at the end of this episode. I love this shot here. This whole shot of like how big the Borg cube is, and you can see this, the scale of it. It kind of goes down to an area where you can't even see past it, and it continues to go up, and it's just wall by wall by wall, different Borgs kind of sitting in their little regeneration pods and just doing their thing. Speaking of which, we definitely see a Borg open up his eye, but it happens while Picard is kind of also being manhandled by two reclaimed Borg, and then he immediately meets up with Hugh. So it's unclear if the implication here is that Picard was just envisioning this in his mind and he was just panicking, or if they were actually just showing the viewer that the Borg just activated because of the presence of Locutus, and that they are going to be starting to do things on that cube. Now, you got to keep in mind now, the rest of this episode is very, very long from this point forward, but in real time of the show, only a few minutes are going by. Like, it's very, very short period of time. So these Borg could be activating and already wandering around this, again, massive Borg cube without anybody noticing just yet. Everything is happening very, 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 very quickly in this episode in the real time of the show. So it's very likely that this guy did wake up, and he's going to wake up all of his little buddies, and they're going to go around and start jacking up all those researchers and assimilating everybody, and then they're going to have to do a little erase on that non-assimilation thing for 5,000 days and go back to day one. I loved Hugh and Picard in this episode. John DeLarco did a fantastic job as Hugh in the previous episode he was in, but he just rocks it in this episode. And I don't know if that's just because this was later on in the filming, he had a little bit more time to get comfortable with the role, or if it was because he was on set with Sir Patrick Stewart and they worked a lot better together. Nothing against him and Issa Briones or anything like that, but you could definitely tell he was shining a lot more in this episode. And we spend so much time with the two of them and learning about what's going on in the cube. And I love the shot of them hugging each other and embracing each other. And it's like, it was almost like a relaxing thing for me as a viewer, because everything so far since Picard has left has been super dangerous, very hostile, very unexpected, very like, tense. And this little moment here was just like, finally we meet someone who's just willing to help and not get anything in return and just be helpful. And it was just nice. It was very touching. Okay, so one of the key elements of this episode was Picard coming to face his PTSD and his past of being a Borg. Now, they touched on it very briefly in the prior episode with his conversation between him and Seven, but we really played up a lot in this. And again, this goes way beyond what I had kind of originally theorized. I thought we were going to get a little bit of it, but there was a significant amount of this episode dedicated to Picard kind of just coming to terms with being on the Borg cube and being surrounded with these former reclaimed Borg individuals, almost to the point where he, is like averting his gaze and he's like clamming up and he's not speaking and he's very, very jittery. And then Hugh, just the doll, the beautiful Hugh, has to kind of encourage him and remind him of who he is and the power of his name as Jean-Luc Picard, which is something that Picard did for Hugh in the TNG episodes. And it was just fantastic and loving and touching. And, it was just great. I like how these characters are interacting here. And it's kind of come full circle between Picard originally supporting Hugh and now Hugh supporting Picard. It was such a great sequence. I loved every single bit of this. And again, kind of walking around with Hugh and Picard, we find out quite a bit more about what's going on. So we know that the Romulans are in control of the cube, and inside of the cube, there is a research program going on. That's the reclamation portion of that, and that's what Hugh is in charge of. Hugh's in charge of that program, and their job is to reclaim these individuals as, former Borgs and let them kind of gather their own, new identity and also face their past of what they were as Borg drones. Now, I do think that the give and take here from what I'm gathering based off of this episode is the Romulans are taking all of the Borg, equipment and selling them or using them for sale or, military industrial complex or whatever the hell it is, while they're allowing Hugh and the Federation scientists to kind of study and help these individuals kind of gain their identity back. Now, I don't think that the Romulans are doing that just because it's fun. I think that they're trying to keep things slightly more above board, because this is very similar to what Bajeza was doing in the previous episode with Icheb, but she was doing it in a way more inhumane way and doing it way more illegally by just capturing people who had Borg implants and just ripping them out of them while they were still alive. This is a much more safe and humane approach, so I think that the Romulans are attempting to potentially do something probably wrong, but doing it in broad daylight right in front of the Federation with the Federation's support. The Federation clearly knows that this cube exists and that there are Federation citizens, which Hugh is apparently, and Federation scientists on board. So they're trying to do this above board, and I think that's kind of cool. I'm curious to see when the other shoe drops and find out what the Romulans are really up to, though. Speaking of what the Romulans are really up to, one of the key lines of this episode that I found rather interesting was Hugh saying to Picard that they have a new queen, and it's a Romulan. And you could definitely see that as him just trying to imply and like do like a play on words, that because they had Borg queens, now they have a new queen, which are the Romulans. But given all of the rumors and information surrounding the possible return of Denise Crosby as the Romulan Empress Sela, that she was Empress in STO, but she was like a Tal Shiar or kind of a Romulan intelligence operative in TNG. Given all the rumors surrounding Denise Crosby returning as Sela, I think that he was directly implying that it is Sela who is pulling all of these strings. Now, I have made that kind of theory in the past, where she was going to be the one that was in charge of the Zhat Vash, and she's the one that's kind of going off and trying to take care of all of these, synthetic life forms and is trying to rebuild the Romulan Empire from within. I think that's what he was trying to imply here. I don't think it was just a random line that he stated, so I think the writers are trying to tell us something here. They love kind of foreshadowing and kind of layering in the dialogue and kind of dropping us little hints, so I think that that meant something more than just it being a pun. Something that I really enjoyed was, again, the more exploration of the spiritual side of the Romulans. Again, we've always seen the Romulans kind of being these, giant shoulder pad wearing, mustache twirling, crazy villains that just hate the Federation and everything they stand for. But this show has made a very deliberate effort to try to showcase their other sides of their personality, whether that be leisuring at the bar, playing with cards, having a more spiritual side, having this weird temple where they go through this whole ceremony. Very Vulcan-like, and I like how they're connecting them back to their Vulcan heritage roots before the Sundering. Remember, Romulans and Vulcans existed on the same planet, and then they separated and left and found Romulus together and a bunch of other worlds, but they found Romulus and started the Romulan Star Empire. But there is a shared lineage there. So I like the fact that the show is, again, continuing to explore that and expand on it. The whole sequence here with Soji and Narek in the room where she's trying to open her puzzle box mind and uncover the truth about what's going on in her kind of dreams, I think is really cool. I am curious if they're going to kind of expand more about what these dreams are. They allude to it in the episode is her AI programming is essentially creating a safe space so that her conscious mind doesn't realize that she's not a human. So when she does things that are not human, these kinds of things, these ideas of hers that are like, well, what the hell? Why am I able to do that or know that or whatever it is? It kind of gets pushed into this unconscious AI space where she experiences these things as dreams and then can kind of allow them to kind of exist external to her, so it doesn't, I assume, drive her mad. I wonder how many of these robots that Maddox went through before he figured out how to do that, but I like the idea that they dream. Do androids dream of electric sheep? I mean, that's a very common phrase that people say, because obviously it was a book. It was based, the basis of Blade Runner and the whole, synthetics and that thing, and that's clearly what they're drawing their inspiration from here. But I'm looking forward for them to expanding on that a little bit more and maybe understanding a little bit more about how the Asha twins are different from other synthetic life forms, specifically that of these Soong-style androids. Now, again, what's interesting is during Soji's kind of memory callback thing, she does not recognize the face of the man who she calls her father. Now, we know in the show, or at least what we've been told so far, is Maddox is the one that created the Asha twins. He did this with the help of obviously all of the Soong technology and research, and obviously the help of Agnus and probably a few others. So why she cannot picture his face, this doesn't look like Bruce Maddox, but we've only seen him with a beard and kind of his scraggly hair, but this doesn't look like him at all. So who this person is may be part of just an AI routine that just doesn't allow her to identify who her dad is, because it had to be somebody who was just created in this weird unconscious state. So this may be nobody. Or we may be getting told something here that maybe Maddox either wasn't the person that created the Asha twins, or he did it with some more help. But I am curious to understand more about who this individual was and why we cannot see his face. This is probably the weirdest thing that we saw in this episode, which is Soji's face attached to one of those drawing mannequins laid out on the table. Now, again, we had that foreshadow at the beginning of the episode, and this is obviously her subconscious mind trying to reconcile the fact that she is not a human, but in fact a doll in some instances, or something that requires to be put together. Now, I don't think that a younger Soji saw her body parts in pieces or anything like that. I don't think this is a literal thing. I think this is just, again, like her mind trying to tell her, from a subconscious thing going into conscious, that she is not human. And I think that's why this is maybe something that, I think that's why she doesn't activate and start killing everybody. Obviously, Narek tries to kill her, so then she freaks the hell out. But I don't think that this program was put there, by accident. I think it was deliberately placed there, like Narek said, in order to help her realize this at some point in the future when she was ready. Now, obviously, Narek and the rest of the Zatvash crew kind of forced her along that path a little bit. But I do think that Maddox put this in here deliberately in order for her to figure that out at some point. I like the fact that we have this box again. Again, we had that call forward from the beginning of the episode, and now we see it again here with this little device in here, and I like how it opens up and spews out like a little gas, this radiation gas. Now, a lot of people are going to say, is that the Thaleron radiation thing that they had at Nemesis? Well, it looks very similar. It operates very similar, how it opens up and stuff like that. It doesn't look like it all that much, though, because obviously the color is different, and it doesn't have that weird like DNA strand thing, but this could be kind of an advancement of that technology. Very, very similar in design, but I really enjoyed it. One of the other things that I really enjoyed about this episode was just seeing Soji punch through the floorboards and kind of ripping the Borg cube metal apart. It really kind of showcased just how strong these, synthetic life forms are. We obviously know Data is very strong. We know Lore is very strong. We know the other synthetic life forms are very strong. Obviously, Dodge was kicking a lot of butt in the first episode, but it was just a fun way to kind of remind the audience that these androids are very, very strong, and I think that's probably something that's going to come up later on. Okay, so one of the things that I really enjoyed, again, having a payoff on that they've been building on this entire season, is the fact that the Borg cube walls kind of move based off of the needs of the user. Now, Hugh, and obviously Picard now knows about it too, but Hugh was able to uncover this queen kind of area, this special cove of the queen, that she has like this really cool, you know, portal device that they got from an assimilated planet, which is also a really cool callback to a planet in the Delta Quadrant. But I like the fact that they, again, kind of paid off the moving walls. Like there's a purpose to it. And this is kind of like a giant maze. And if you're not careful of where you go, you could get entirely lost if you don't really know how to get back to where you started. So I like the fact that they paid that off and that this wall kind of like disappeared. And I wonder if that's going to come up in the next episode, where obviously the Zhat Vash are going to be like, where the hell did Soji and Picard go? What did you do with them? And then he's going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know where they went. And they're not going to be able to find them because they're no longer on the cube. One of the other things that I really enjoyed a little bit about this, you know, particular episode was that they're already starting to establish kind of a distance and distrust between Picard and Soji. Now, she obviously followed him through the portal and with him to kind of get off the cube, but even right at the end there where he tries to reach out for her hand to kind of take it to go through the portal cube, she's like, nah, don't touch me, I'm just going to go through on my own, you know, volition. I like that they're establishing that, because based off of the preview for the next episode, she's obviously very hesitant to just believe whatever Picard is saying to her, because obviously she just found out that her entire life is a lie, and the guy she was falling in love with was really just trying to kill her and get information out of her. So her whole life is kind of falling apart in some ways, so it makes sense that she wouldn't immediately start trusting Picard, even if he is the iconic admiral and she probably knows everything about him. But it makes sense that she trusts him enough to kind of get away from this violent situation of people who are trying to kill her, but not enough to immediately just be like, okay, I'll do whatever you say, which I like the fact that they're bothering to do that. And finally, of course, the things that I love the most about the preview for the next episode is this beautiful shot of William T. Riker, and I cannot wait for the next episode. Okay, guys and gals, that pretty much wraps up my review. I tried to make this as short as possible. Again, I loved it so much that it was really hard for me to condense this down. I think it's already still like a 30-minute video, but, you know, such is life. I really, really enjoyed this episode again. This is probably now my favorite episode, and I cannot wait to find out what happens in episode 7, 8, 9, and then, of course, the finale. We have so much more plot to get through, and honestly, I'm running out of theories to kind of pass along. The only big one that I have right now is that Sela is definitely going to be in charge of the Zhat Vash, and then he's going to the Rikers to try to help him kind of stay hidden for a little while the La Serena is on its way to the planet that they're staying on, which we now know for sure is not Beta-Z, but that's whatever. That's okay. They're on some kind of other world, and I can't wait to see what that is. All right, so go ahead and let me know what you guys and gals thought about this episode. Get your comments up down below. What did you like? What did you dislike? What were your favorite moments from this entire thing? And what kind of theories do you have kind of moving forward towards the end of this season now that we're over the halfway part? I'm curious to hear what you guys and gals say. Get that stuff up down below, and we'll go ahead and get the conversation started. Live long and prosper, my Trekkies!